This is Ally. As a change of pace, to the Chastity Journal, I thought I would throw in a game to play with your chastity slave. This game was made up by my friend Grace. She wrote the rules that are in the podcast description, and I will let her tell you about how the game is going with one of her chastity slaves. I'm jealous of how young and beautiful she is and how many hunks line up to be her chastity slave. And she is so mean.
I am Grace. I am in the community with Ally, who runs a woman's group in a local BDSM group. We have a small male chastity group of about 30 guys and about half a dozen women. Typically, the key holders have a small group of chastity slaves and a waiting list. At 28, I am the youngest key holder and typically have 3 chastity slaves and a dozen or more on the waiting list. It costs to be on my waiting list and even more for my active list. All my slaves are required to get Prince Albert piercings and to get fitted for one of the secure cages I approve. The cages and slaves are inspected and approved before they are allowed to play this game. Most men cannot handle real chastity and my turnover is very high. I have learned to get cages that are relatively comfortable and roomy but do not offer the resistance most guys need to be able to get off in the cage. I have about success rate in preventing orgasms in 95% of plus my caged slaves based on some extensive stress tests I run on each slave. Stop the orgasms and very few chastity slaves hang in more than a month. It's a blast watching men unwind. My relationship with each slave varies and I define the sex, if any, that we have. With my chosen few I do have sex. 95% of the sex involves my chosen slaves going down on me, or fucking me with a strap-on dildo. My goal is to break men down in the kindest way possible. I believe each chastity slave I play with wants to be teased and denied to the point they break down. The One More Dice game below does just that. It gives them hope, but the house always wins. 0. I am big into playing games with my slaves. My favorite game is called One More Dice. Ally asked me to share the rules of this game as a change of pace to the Chastity Journal. 0. The rules are in the podcast description and I will talk about a game in progress this month with Joe. Joe is 45, keeps himself in good shape. Before becoming a chastity slave, he masturbated or fucked a few times every day. He has been in the One More Dice game for more than a month. He was in round 1 for 2 weeks, the dice were friendly. He was in round 2 for 3 weeks, the last week he was so horny and desperate I went on several dates with him outside of the game because it is really fun teasing a man that stays hard for hours at a time and that wants me more than anything in the universe. He went straight into round 3 with just one hand job despite my advice for him take a week or 2 off to empty out his system and unwind. He has almost been in round 3 for 2 weeks. So in the last 5 weeks he has only come once. I warned him that one release would not take care of 3 weeks of lusting after me. I have experience in these matters. He will be in round 3 for at least 7 or 8 weeks if he gets great rolls of the dice. More than likely it will take him 3 months to get through round 3. I don't think he can do it, but I look forward to feeding my sexuality off of his energy until he implodes. Poor Joe. Joe thinks I am the sexiest creature in the universe, but he is really struggling with this One More Dice game. After 3 sessions, he is losing ground in the game. If you are one of the few women that play male chastity games with one or more of your boyfriends, I have a game called One More Dice. First, one definition. M.O.E. Multiple orgasmic experience. I define AMOE as 3 or more orgasms during a 1-hour session. Guys in chastity cages generally give great head. Expecting a guy in a chastity cage to give you AMOE every time he goes down on you is a reasonable expectation. Since Joe is in the 3rd round, he brought 3 dice to the dice ceremony. The next game, he must bring 4 dice, etc. I lock up Joe in a secure cage. Since we are in private when this occurs, I then take off my clothes, or put on something more comfortable. Then, we roll the dice. We total the dice. In our current game he got 14, that was good for me, not so much for him. In this case, I had changed into something outrageous. As we did the dice roll at our local pub, I bought both pitchers of Bud. I thought it was the least I could do. Per the rules, he must give me 14 MOEs before I give him the keys back. Guys are crazy to agree to such rules, but they are so easy when they are turned on. I agreed to give him access at least twice a week. Right before he goes down on me each time, we roll a single dice, we multiply the number on the dice by 5 and that is how many minutes he has to give me an MOE. If he doesn't do it in the time limit, we add 3 more MOEs to his quota. Here is how the game with Joe has gone so far on the 3rd round. We meet at our favorite bar for the dice roll 3 days after he got locked up. He rolled 5, which gave him 25 minutes to give me an MO. We went to his place and he had no problems with the clock. I had come a dozen times before the alarm went off. He was down to owing me 13 MOs. We met a few days later and he rolled a 4, which gave him 20 minutes, which was plenty of time for a man of his talents. Again, we went to his place and I was in heaven 10 minutes later. He is really, really gifted with his tongue. He was down to owing me 12 MOs. The 3rd time we met at the bar he rolled a 2. We went to my house and he jumped in with his talented tongue with his 10-minute time limit. Based on his past performance, it was going to be challenging, but possible. My cat was crying and making noise in the background and distracting me. I came hard about 30 seconds before the alarm went off. But, I only came once before the timer. He rocked my world for the next 30 minutes. He cuddled up with me for the night. In the morning, we got up and discussed where he stood in the game. He now owes me 12 plus 3 or 15 MOs in the 2nd week of the game. It was the first time Joe spent the night. I had him cuddle up against my naked ass, which he loves, for the night. Neither of us got much sleep because he would lose control and start pressing the cage into my ass. And even when he was still I could feel his penis throbbing in his cage. That would get me all hot and bothered and I would have him go down on me and fuck me with the strap on until I was satiated. That would work for 0 me, but of course, when we went back to cuddling, he got progressively worse instead of better. I should have sent him to my guest bed, but I thought I had a chance to break him. It was so much fun fussing at him to lay still when I knew he couldn't. But we pulled an all-nighter and he was a trembling mess by morning. He is usually quite articulate, but he was a mumbling mess by morning. All of this was outside of the game and he actually wanted to play another round of the game in the morning, but his sessions are Monday and Friday nights, so he had to wait 3 days. I did serve him pancakes in the buff and let him pleasure me until my 3 o'clock shift started. I drove him back to his car at the bar we met at last night before my shift started. I was exhausted and satiated. He was a bundle of nerves and completely non-functional. He was completely one-dimensional by then, going down on me was all he could do. I let him give me a quickie in his car to get him out of my car. He was not fit to drive, so I told him to sleep in the car and I would drop off his keys at my supper break around 7 p.m. I don't usually give such service to my chastity slaves, but I have never seen a guy who was in a cage and couldn't get off be able to pleasure me for nearly 20 hours. Apparently, my cage designer and I got Joe's cage perfect. I am afraid he will show up at my place without an invitation and I will drop him from the game. I really should not have let a chastity slave with his sex drive and lack of experience spend the night. I fear he will not be functional around any female as that he finds attractive or that reminds him of mine. Suggestion for my women friends. If you can get a man to put on a chastity cage and give you the keys, why wouldn't you? Every woman sh. Old experience a desperate man giving her head at least once in their lifetime. Also, I suggest that you negotiate your games after you lock up your man and after you remove your clothes. Men lose half their IQ when they get turned on. I don't normally recommend you play with more than 2 guys at a time. 3 guys wanting you at a time is insane, especially if the games drag on a few weeks. I will drop in to give you some chastity games from time to time. Until then, remember, a desperate man gives good head. Grace.
Chastity Journal Disclaimer. This journal is a work of fiction and any resemblance to those living or dead is purely coincidental. Some of the events depicted herein should only be tried with partners that you trust and with whom you have established a good line of communication. The games depicted herein are often more fun in fantasy than in reality. Enjoy with a grain of salt and an open mind.